I learned to speak Mandarin Chinese in a city on the Yangtze River in 1978, 6,000 miles from home, because a dam engineer from Wuhan told me that if I wanted to understand the water, I had to understand the people who lived beside it. I was 26 years old. I spent 2 years learning both. 46 years later, that language saved my house, my family, and my life. But I'll get to that. The chopsticks were the first thing my son-in-law noticed. It was Thanksgiving, November 28, 2024, at Vivian and Shangley's house in West Knoxville. Turkey, sweet potato casserole, green bean casserole, cornbread, the whole southern spread, plus a few Chinese dishes that Shangley's mother, Mei Ling, had prepared. Dumplings, braised pork belly, stir-fried greens with garlic. My daughter's table was always like this, a collision of Tennessee and Hangzhou, and I loved it. Lily, my granddaughter, 7 years old, was sitting next to me showing me a drawing she'd made at school, a turkey with what appeared to be 6 legs. August, 4, was in his booster seat methodically disassembling a dinner roll into particles so small they could be classified as a new state of matter. Vivian was moving between the kitchen and the dining room with the controlled intensity of a woman who had inherited her mother's belief that no one should leave the table hungry and was personally offended by empty plates. And I was eating dumplings with chopsticks. Shangley looked at me from across the table. "Dad, you're pretty good with those." I shrugged. "Had some practice. I didn't know you could use chopsticks." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Shane." He laughed. He had a good laugh, my son-in-law. Warm, easy, the laugh of a man who had learned to make Americans comfortable. He'd been doing it since he arrived in this country from Hangzhou in 2005, 19 years of calibrating his charm to the exact frequency that put people at ease. He was very good at it. I had been charmed myself for the better part of a decade, but I wasn't charmed anymore. I just didn't know why yet. Something had been bothering me for months. Not a fact, not a discovery, just a feeling. The feeling you get when a load-bearing wall isn't quite plumb, and the floor above it has started to sag a 1/4 inch. Imperceptible to anyone who isn't trained to notice, but obvious to a man who spent over 40 years as a civil engineer, making sure that the things people depend on don't collapse. Something in my life wasn't plumb, and I couldn't see it. Not yet. Dinner wound down the way Thanksgiving dinners do, slowly, with second helpings and complaints about being too full, followed immediately by requests for pie. Vivian took Lily and August to the bathroom to wash up. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, and for the first time that evening I was alone at the table with Shangley and his mother. Mei Ling was 68. She had arrived from Hangzhou 2 weeks earlier for one of her regular 3-month stays. She spoke almost no English, a few words, hello, thank you, beautiful grandchildren, but she and I had always communicated through smiles and gestures and the universal language of grandparents who loved the same children. I liked her, or I thought I did. Shangley poured his mother more tea. They began speaking in Mandarin. This was normal. They always spoke Mandarin to each other. I had been hearing it at family gatherings for 9 years, a pleasant background hum of tones and rhythms that everyone in the family assumed was as incomprehensible to me as birdsong. Everyone assumed wrong. I had been understanding every word they said for 9 years. Every conversation at every dinner, every aside in the kitchen, every phone call that Shangley took in the other room, thinking the walls and the language barrier made him invisible. I understood it all. I just never had a reason to say so, until now. Shangley glanced toward the kitchen door, confirmed Vivian was gone. Then he turned to his mother and said, in Mandarin, the words that ended his marriage, his scheme, and his place in my family. 老人把所有的东西都欠给我们了，房子是我们得了，我们只需要等老人死。The old man signed everything over. The house is ours now. We just have to wait for the old man to die. My hands stopped moving. The dumpling I had been lifting was suspended between the plate and my mouth, held by chopsticks that suddenly felt very heavy. Mei Ling sipped her tea. 很好，你觉得他还能活多久？他看起来很健康。Good. How long do you think? He looks healthy. Shangley leaned back. 他72了，也许还有10年。 但是委托书意味着我们现在就可以动钱了。等薇薇案发现的时候，已经台湾了。He's 72, could be 10 years, but the power of attorney means we can start moving money now. By the time Vivian notices, it will be too late. Mei Ling nodded. 如果薇薇安问问题呢? And if Vivian asks questions? Shengli smiled, the warm, charming, calibrated smile I had trusted for 9 years. 我会处理薇薇案的。他相信我，他不懂财务，他是个兽医，他管动物，不管钱。I'll handle Vivian. She trusts me. She doesn't understand finances. She's a vet. She takes care of animals, not money. I set down the chopsticks. Not fast, not angry, slowly, deliberately. The way you set down a tool when you've finished a job and the work has shown you something you didn't expect to find. The way my father set down his coffee cup the morning he told me my mother had cancer, carefully, like the cup was the only thing holding the world together, and if he set it down wrong, everything would shatter. The chopsticks touched the table without a sound. I placed them parallel, side by side, neat and precise, the way I had been taught in Wuhan by a woman named Professor Lin, who told me that how a man handles his chopsticks tells you everything about how he handles his life. The table went quiet. Shengli and Mei Ling were looking at me. Maybe they sensed something. Maybe the silence had a different quality than the normal silence of an old man who didn't understand what was being said. Maybe it was my face. I don't know what my face was doing. I know what my heart was doing. It was breaking. But breaking quietly, the way concrete cracks under too much load. Internal first, invisible, and then all at once. I looked at my son-in-law, the man my daughter loved, the father of my grandchildren, the man who had sat at my kitchen table and helped me sign documents that I now understood were designed to steal everything I had, the man who was waiting for me to die so he could sell my home. And I said, in the Mandarin I had learned 46 years ago from engineers and professors and cab drivers and noodle shop owners in a city on the Yangtze River. 老人听懂了你刚才说的每一个字，而且这个老人不会安静地死去。The old man understood every word you just said, and the old man is not going to die quietly. 5 seconds. That's how long the silence lasted. I know because the clock on the dining room wall was one of those old analog models with a second hand that ticked loud enough to hear when the room was quiet enough, and I counted 5 ticks in the silence between my last word and Shengli's first breath. In those 5 seconds, I watched my son-in-law's face undergo a transformation that I will remember for the rest of my life. The charm dissolved. Not faded, dissolved, like a mask dropped in water. The warm eyes went cold. The easy smile collapsed. The calculated friendliness that he had worn like a uniform for 9 years fell away, and underneath it was something raw and exposed and panicked, the face of a man who has just realized that the foundation he built his scheme on was rotten the entire time. Mei Ling's teacup rattled against the saucer. She was staring at me with her mouth open. Her hand was shaking, and unlike my grandfather's trembling in the last story you heard, this woman's hands were shaking because she had just heard an old man from Tennessee speak her language with the accent of a Hubei province engineer, and her entire understanding of the past 9 years had just collapsed like a bridge with a cracked footing. Ni hui shuo zhongwen, she stammered. You speak Chinese? 说了46年了, I replied, for 46 years. Shengli found his voice. Dad, we were just... It wasn't what it sounded like. We were discussing Shane. I used his American name, the name he had chosen to make himself familiar, the name that was itself a kind of camouflage. I am a civil engineer. I spent over 40 years building structures that had to hold up under pressure. I know exactly what a load-bearing lie sounds like when it cracks, and yours just cracked. The kitchen door opened. Vivian walked in with Lily and August, one child on each hand, her face bright, ready for pie. She saw me, saw Shengli, saw Mei Ling. She saw the silence, which was the loudest thing in the room. What happened? She said. Why does everyone look like somebody died? Nobody died, I said. But something did. But before I tell you what happened in that dining room after Vivian walked in, I need to tell you who I am. Not who Shengli thought I was. the old man, the easy target, the trusting father-in-law who signed whatever was put in front of him. I need to tell you who I actually am, and how I ended up speaking Mandarin at a Thanksgiving dinner in Knoxville, Tennessee. My name is Earl Hubbard. I was born in 1952 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the city the government built in secret during World War II to produce the atomic bomb. My father was a pipe fitter at the Y-12 National Security Complex. My mother was a secretary at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I grew up in a town where everyone worked on things they couldn't talk about, and the most important skill a person could have was the ability to keep a secret. I studied civil engineering at the University of Tennessee. Graduated in 1974. Got hired at the Tennessee Valley Authority, the federal agency that manages the river system across 7 states, the dams, the reservoirs, the flood control, the power generation. TVA was, and is, one of the largest infrastructure projects in American history. I spent over 40 years helping keep it standing. In 1978, TVA selected me for something unusual. The U.S. had just normalized relations with China, and the Chinese Ministry of Water Resources had invited American engineers to participate in a 2-year exchange program focused on hydroelectric dam design. China was building massive dam infrastructure along the Yangtze and its tributaries, and they wanted Western expertise. TVA sent 3 engineers. I was one of them. I arrived in Wuhan in September of 1978. I was 26 years old. I had never been outside the United States. I had never eaten food I couldn't identify. I had never heard a language I couldn't at least partially understand. Mandarin Chinese was a wall I had to climb with my fingernails, and I climbed it because I had no choice. My Chinese colleagues spoke no English, the project documentation was in Chinese, and my survival as an engineer and as a human being depended on learning to communicate. I studied with a tutor, a professor at Wuhan University named Lin Shuying. Professor Lin was 42 years old, had survived the Cultural Revolution by hiding her education behind a factory worker's uniform, and had the patience of a woman who had learned that teaching was the most radical act of hope a person could perform. She taught me Mandarin 4 hours a day, 6 days a week for 2 years. By the end of those 2 years, I dreamed in Mandarin. I argued in Mandarin. I told jokes in Mandarin that made Chinese engineers laugh, which Professor Lin said was the true measure of fluency. Not grammar, not vocabulary, but humor. I came home in 1980 with a language inside me that had no place to go. Knoxville, Tennessee, in 1980 was not a city with a large Chinese-speaking population. There was no one to talk to. So I read. Chinese newspapers when I could find them. Chinese novels. Chinese films later, when VHS and then DVDs and then the internet made them accessible. I corresponded with colleagues in Wuhan for years, handwritten letters that crossed the Pacific and took weeks to arrive. The language lived in me, like a room in my house that I kept furnished but rarely visited. It was always there. Always ready, I just never needed it. Until Thanksgiving 2024, sitting at a table with a man who thought I was deaf to his betrayal because he couldn't imagine that a 72-year-old retired engineer from Tennessee might speak his language better than he spoke. Mine. I met Nadine Harper in 1981, 1 year after returning from China. She was a nurse at Fort Sanders Hospital. She had dark hair and a laugh that could fill a room and a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only important thing happening in the world. We married in 1982. Vivian was born the following year, in 1983. We bought the house on Lions View Pike in 1986, a 4-bedroom on 1.2 acres overlooking the Tennessee River. We paid $127,000 for it. Nadine said it was too much house for 3 people. I told her we'd grow into it. We grew into it. 38 years of life in that house. Vivian's childhood, birthday parties in the backyard, Thanksgivings around the dining room table, the view of the river from the porch, changing with the seasons, frozen in January, green in July, gold in October. Nadine planted a garden along the south side that produced tomatoes so large the neighbors accused her of witchcraft. Nadine died on March 14, 2020. Stroke. She was in the garden when it happened. I found her beside the tomato cages, on her knees, her hands in the soil. She was 67. We had been married for 38 years, and when she was gone, the house on Lions View Pike became very, very quiet. Grief makes you vulnerable. I know that now. I knew it then, too, in the abstract way that engineers know things, theoretically, structurally, without the lived experience of feeling the ground give way beneath you. When Nadine died, the ground gave way, and Shengli Chen was there to fill the crack. He started visiting more. Weekly, then twice a week. He brought the grandchildren, which was the one thing guaranteed to get me off the couch and out of the fog. He fixed things around the house, the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom, the loose railing on the porch steps, the gutter that had pulled away from the fascia. He was handy, attentive, present. Everything I needed and nothing I should have trusted. In the spring of 2021, about a year after Nadine's death, Shengli sat down with me at the kitchen table and opened a folder. "Dad, I've been thinking about estate planning. With Mom gone, it might be smart to add Vivian to the deed on the house, just in case something happens to you. It'll make the transfer seamless. No probate, no delays." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like something a good son-in-law would suggest. I didn't notice that the documents he'd prepared didn't just add Vivian. They added Vivian and Shengli as joint tenants with right of survivorship, meaning when Earl dies, the house passes to Vivian and Shengli automatically, bypassing probate and any will provisions. I signed. 6 months later, in late 2021, another conversation. Another folder. "Dad, I think we should set up a power of attorney, just a precaution. If you ever have a medical emergency and can't make decisions, someone needs to be authorized to handle your finances. Vivian's at the clinic 12 hours a day. I'm more available. It makes sense for it to be me." It made sense. It all made sense, the way a well-designed trap makes sense. Every piece logical, every step reasonable, every argument sound. I signed. In 2022, Shengli used the power of attorney to access my retirement accounts. He transferred approximately $340,000 into a joint account that he controlled. He told me it was for investment diversification and showed me documents I couldn't fully understand. Spreadsheets and account statements that blurred together in the way financial documents do when you're 70 years old and your reading glasses aren't strong enough and you trust the person explaining them. By 2024, my son-in-law had legal claim to my house, control of my finances, and a plan to sell the property that my wife and I had lived in for 38 years to the highest bidder the moment my heart stopped beating. And I had no idea, not until Thanksgiving, not until the chopsticks. Now, let me take you back to that dining room. The moment after Vivian walked in. The moment after I said something died. Shengli stood up from the table. His chair scraped against the hardwood. "Vivian, your father is confused. I'm not confused, Shane. I understood every word you said to your mother. Every word." Vivian looked at me. "Dad, you speak Mandarin?" "Fluently, since 1978. You never told me. It never came up." I looked at her. My daughter, my only child, the baby I held in this very house 41 years ago. "Vivian, sit down. You need to hear what your husband just said about me. About you, about this family." She sat, slowly. The way you sit when you can feel the ground shifting. I told her, word for word. The old man signed everything over. The house is ours now. We just have to wait for him to die. I'll handle Vivian. She trusts me. She doesn't understand finances. She's a vet. She takes care of animals, not money. Each sentence landed on my daughter's face like a stone dropped into still water. I watched the ripples spread. Confusion first, then recognition, then the slow, terrible understanding that the man she had married, the man she had chosen to build a life with, the father of her children, had been dismantling her father's life from the inside for 3 years. She turned to Shengli. "Is this true?" "Vivian, he's twisting what I said. It was a joke. I was joking with my mother." "Ni zai pianta," I said in Mandarin. "You're lying to her." Then, in English, "And you've been lying to both of us for years." Mei Ling stood up from the table. She began speaking rapidly in Mandarin, telling Shengli they should leave, they should go now, they should call a lawyer. I let her speak. I understood every word, and every word was evidence. Vivian stood up. She was shaking, not with fear, with rage. The quiet, compressed rage of a woman who has just discovered that her trust was a weapon used against her own father. "Get out," she said to Shengli. "Get out of this house. Vivian, please. You used me. You used my father. You used my mother's death to get close to him. You've been stealing from him for 3 years, and I didn't see it because I trusted you." Her voice broke. "I trusted you with my father." Shengli looked at me, looked at Vivian, looked at his mother. The calculation was still happening behind his eyes. I could see it. The rapid assessment of options, the search for an angle, the instinct to find leverage. But there was no leverage left. The language barrier that had been his greatest asset for 9 years had just been demolished by a 72-year-old man with chopsticks and a memory that reached back to a classroom in Wuhan. He left. He took Mei Ling with him. Vivian didn't watch them go. She was on her knees in front of my chair, her face pressed against my hands, crying the way she had cried when she was a child, and something had hurt her that she didn't understand. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "I know you didn't, sweetheart. He was using all of us, the whole time. Yes. I brought him into our family. I brought him to you. You brought me my grandchildren, too. Don't forget that." She looked up at me, tears streaming, mascara ruined, the same brown eyes her mother had, the eyes that saw the good in everything, even when the good was buried under years of deception. "How long have you spoken Mandarin?" "Since before you were born." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I thought about it. Because in Oak Ridge, where I grew up, the most important thing a person could do was keep a secret. I didn't keep this one on purpose. It just never seemed important. Until tonight. It saved us. It saved the house. You saved yourself. The moment you told him to get out, that was you. She squeezed my hands. "We need a lawyer." "I have one. Wendell Mabry. I'm calling him first thing tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Dad, call him now." I smiled. She sounded like her mother. Nadine never waited for tomorrow either. I called Wendell at 8:30 that night. Thanksgiving night. He answered on the 4th ring, slightly out of breath, probably in the middle of his own leftover turkey. "Earl, happy Thanksgiving. Everything all right?" "No, Wendell, I need you to listen carefully. I've made some mistakes, and I need your help fixing them." I told him everything: the deed change, the power of attorney, the retirement accounts, the dinner conversation. By the time I finished, Wendell was no longer eating turkey. "Earl, what you're describing is elder financial abuse under Tennessee Code Annotated, Section 71-6-117. The manipulation of a grieving elderly person into signing legal documents for the financial benefit of a family member. This is a crime. I know what it is. I need to know what we do about it." First thing Monday morning, we filed to revoke the power of attorney. That stops the bleeding. Then we petition to have the deed change reversed on the grounds of undue influence. And we file a report with the Knox County District Attorney's Office. What about the money? The $340,000? We'll pursue recovery through civil action. If he moved it into accounts we can trace, and he almost certainly did because people like this aren't as smart as they think they are, we can get it back. And Shengli? That depends on the DA. But elder financial abuse in Tennessee carries up to 12 years. If they pursue charges, and based on what you're telling me they absolutely should, your son-in-law is looking at real prison time. Wendell? Yeah? Thank you for answering on Thanksgiving. Earl, you've been my client for 20 years. I'd answer on Christmas morning if you needed me. Now go eat some pie and try to sleep. We'll start fixing this on Monday. I didn't sleep, but I did eat pie. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Wendell filed to revoke the power of attorney on Monday, December 2nd. A judge granted the revocation the same day, emergency motion, given the documented financial abuse. By Wednesday, Wendell had filed a petition to reverse the deed change. The petition argued that the addition of Shengli Chen to the deed was obtained through undue influence over a grieving elderly person, a textbook case under Tennessee elder abuse statutes. Shengli hired an attorney, a good one, from Nashville. The attorney contacted Wendell with a proposal. Shengli would voluntarily remove his name from the deed and return the retirement funds in exchange for Earl dropping any criminal complaint. Wendell called me. "It's your decision, Earl. We can take the deal and get your assets back quickly, or we can push criminal charges and make this longer and messier." "What would you recommend?" "I'd recommend getting your house back first. Criminal charges can always be filed later. The statute of limitations on elder abuse in Tennessee is 4 years. We have time. Take the deal, get my house back, get my money back, then we'll see." The deal was executed in January 2025. Shengli's name was removed from the deed. The retirement funds, all $340,000, were returned to my accounts. The power of attorney was formally revoked and shredded in Wendell's office with me watching. Vivian filed for divorce in February. It was, by all accounts, the quietest and most devastating divorce in Knox County that year. No shouting, no courtroom drama, just a woman sitting across from the man she had married and asking him one question. Was any of it real? Shengli didn't answer, which was, of course, an answer. Vivian was awarded full custody of Lily and August. Shengli received supervised visitation. The house in West Knoxville was sold. Vivian and the children moved in with me, into the house on Lions View Pike, the house that Shengli had been waiting to inherit, the house he had wanted to sell to developers for $1.8 million. That house is now where my grandchildren are growing up. Mei Ling returned to Hangzhou in December, 2 months early. She did not say goodbye to me. She did not say goodbye to Lily or August. She left the way she came, as a guest in my family who had never been what she pretended to be. 6 months have passed. It's May 2025 now, spring in Knoxville. The dogwoods are blooming along Lions View Pike, white and pink against the green hillside. The Tennessee River is high from the spring rains, moving fast, carrying everything downstream the way rivers do, the debris, the runoff, the things that don't belong. I'm sitting on my porch, the same porch where Nadine and I watched 40 years of sunsets. Lily is beside me, drawing. She's moved on from 6-legged turkeys to horses, which she insists have exactly the right number of legs, even when they clearly don't. August is in the yard, chasing a butterfly with the single-minded determination of a 4-year-old who has not yet learned that some things aren't meant to be caught. Vivian is inside, on the phone with a client. She moved her veterinary practice closer to home, a smaller clinic, less money, more time. She's healing. Slowly. The way you heal from a wound that was inflicted by someone you loved. Not all at once, but in layers. Each day a little more scar tissue over the place where the trust used to be. She asked me last week how I kept the Mandarin secret for so long. It wasn't a secret, Vivian. It was just a language, like knowing how to read a blueprint or tie a fishing knot. It was part of me that didn't have a reason to come out. Until it did. Until it did. Do you think Mom knew? Your mother knew everything about me, everything that mattered. Whether she knew about the Mandarin, I honestly can't remember. But if she did, she never mentioned it. That was your mother's way. She held things gently. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I miss her. Every day, sweetheart, every single day. Cooper Grimes drove over from Oak Ridge last Sunday. 74 years old, still sharp, still ornery, still the only other person alive who remembers the exchange program in Wuhan. We sat on the porch with sweet tea and watched the river. Heard you use the Mandarin, he said. Word travels. In Oak Ridge, always has. He took a sip of tea. You know, I always wondered when that would come in handy. 46 years is a long time to carry a skill around without using it. It wasn't unused, it was just waiting. Waiting for what? For the moment it mattered. Cooper nodded slowly. Professor Lin would have been proud. Professor Lin would have corrected my tones. He laughed. I laughed. The river moved below us. The children played in the yard, and the house stood where it has always stood, on 1.2 acres of Tennessee riverfront that my wife and I bought in 1986 for $127,000. The house that a man tried to steal from me while I sat at his table eating dumplings with the chopsticks I learned to use in a city on the Yangtze River in 1978. He thought I was just an old man, a trusting father-in-law, a target. He didn't know that old men from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, keep secrets the way the hills keep coal, deep, quiet, and for a very long time. Nadine, if you can hear me, the house is safe. The garden is growing. Your granddaughter draws horses with too many legs, and your grandson chases butterflies he'll never catch, and our daughter is finding her way back from something that hurt her badly. I'm sitting on our porch, the river is high, the dogwoods are blooming, and I'm still here. Now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you overheard someone you trusted plotting against you in a language they didn't know you spoke? Would you reveal yourself immediately, or would you wait? Would you explode, or would you set your chopsticks down slowly and choose your words with the precision of an engineer who knows that the right response at the right moment can bring down a structure that took years to build? And here's the deeper question. Have you ever trusted someone completely, given them access to your home, your finances, your family, only to discover they were using you the whole time? How did you find out? And what did you do? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, especially anyone who has an elderly parent or grandparent who might be vulnerable to the kind of person who smiles at the dinner table while planning to take everything. Protect the people you love. Listen to the languages you don't think you'll need. And never, ever underestimate an old man with chopsticks. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.